Celebrating the newlyweds, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I suppose we're supposed to call them the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
Exactly.
Now. This morning, this is Buckingham Palace. We're waiting to see them. They're going to be honoring Harry's father, Prince Charles, at a charity event for his 70th birthday. This is the first public appearance for the Duke and Duchess since the royal wedding.
See, they delayed their honeymoon for this. That's how much they wanted to be at a 70th birthday party.
It's a good daughter-in-law right there.
It is indeed. Thank you all for being with us today. I'm Poppy Harlow.
I'm John Berman. At this hour with Duchess Kate Baldwin starts now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. We are following breaking news from Capitol Hill this morning. Just moments ago, House members emerged from a closed-door briefing by the nation's top security officials about election security. And a pretty stunning development in that. The Secretary of Homeland Security pushing back today against the intelligence community's assessment that Russia tried to tip the election in Donald Trump's favor. Again, that was determined by the intel community's report in January of 2017. Let's figure out what's going on here. CNN's Manu Raj on Capitol Hill. Manu, what did the secretary tell you?
Well, Kate, she emerged from a closed-door briefing after talking to a few dozen House members about election security, talking about things that the Homeland Security Department, the federal government, and states need to do to avoid Russian interference, and other states who may be replicating what the Russians did in 2016 to prevent that from happening in the 2018 midterms. And one of the lessons learned was about what they should do differently from the 2016 elections. And specifically, I get a chance to ask her about that intelligence community assessment about the Russian infiltration in 2016. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment, it says very clearly that Vladimir Putin orchestrated a campaign to help Donald Trump win the presidency. When I tried to pin her down on whether or not she agreed with that assessment, she sidestepped the question and seemed to push back.
Secretary, to that point, do you have any reason to doubt the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that said it was Vladimir Putin who tried to meddle in this election to help President Trump win?
I do not believe that I've seen that conclusion. What I do is that the specific intent was to help President Trump win. I'm not aware of that. But I do generally have no reason to doubt any intelligence assessment. I think what they're trying to do, in my opinion, and I defer to the intel community, is just disrupt our belief and our own understanding of what's happening, right? It's an integrity issue of who is saying what and why, and how that may or may not affect an American's behavior and what they believe.
But that assessment did say that Putin orchestrated a cyber campaign with the intention of helping Donald Trump.
Please talk to the camera.
Do you have any disagreement with that?
I do believe that Russia did and will continue to try to manipulate Americans' perspective on a whole variety of issues.
So not answering a question about that. This is what the intelligence community said, Kate, in that January 2017 assessment. It says that they assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. They said they have high confidence in those judgments. And they said they also assess that Putin and the Russian government aspired to help President Trump's election chances when possible by, quote, discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorably to him. And that is similar to what the special counsel Robert Mueller has said in a separate indictment of those Russians in February 2018. And it's notable, too, Kate, the Senate Intelligence Committee reaffirmed what the intelligence community said in its report last week. But Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee have disputed the report, so it's unclear if she's siding with the House Intelligence Committee. But she did say she was, quote, not aware of that assessment. So it's unclear exactly what she was not aware of when it was pretty cut and dry of what they said in January 2017, Kate.
That is pretty amazing stuff, Manu. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I guess we can say that is now one more new question in the Russia investigation, I guess. A lot of news this hour on just that, but with all of it, keep one thing in mind. What we don't know today definitely outweighs what we do know. The president demands the Justice Department turn over classified information about the Russia probe. And after a meeting at the White House, Justice Department officials seem to agree. Here's what we don't know. What exactly DOJ agreed to turn over and when that will happen. Also, President Trump demands the Justice Department investigate whether the FBI planted a spy in his presidential campaign. The Justice Department again seems to agree and turns the question over to the Inspector General. What we don't know is if that will be enough for Donald Trump. But the demand itself is way too much for Democrats and even some Republicans.
President's behavior is the kind of grossly autocratic behavior we'd expect in a banana republic, not a mature democracy. By now, we should all recognize that President Trump's latest demand is just another example of a relentless campaign to distract from the serious wrongdoing being uncovered by the Russia probe.
Well, I think he has a right to. You know, the question is whether it's advisable or not. You know, the Justice Department's been a pretty honest department all these years, as far as I'm concerned, and I think you ought to leave it up to the Justice Department.
So while Orrin Hatch says the president should leave it up to the Justice Department, a group
Sunday. Quite an unusual move, but also walked away from that meeting with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, saying he was going to immediately set up a meeting between those top law enforcement officials and these congressional leaders who want to know more about this Russia investigation. Now, what we don't know here is where that meeting is going to take place, who's going to be invited to that meeting, or what kind of information. Now taking this approach that he wants the investigators themselves to be investigated, Kate.
Yes. Caitlin, what else are we learning, though, about the FBI source that was sharing information on the Trump campaign? The source that the president, of course, is called a spy.
Yeah, another subject that doesn't have a lot of clarity here for the White House, and they are concerned increasingly that that meeting may not take place, and there is a lot of doubt about that historic summit in Singapore, Kate.
There's a lot of doubt about, it seems, almost everything right now. Caitlin, great to see you. Thank you so much for kicking it off. Joining me right now, Jennifer Rogers. She's a former federal prosecutor, now a lecturer at Columbia Law School. Bill Burton, former deputy White House press secretary under President Obama. And Scott Jennings, CNN political commentator and former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Thank you all so much for being here. Jennifer, let's start with Secretary Nielsen and what she said, leaving a meeting, a briefing on election security. Looking at 2016, what can we learn about what lessons were learned for 2018? And she says to Manu Raju that, I feel like I need to quote it because I'm not sure what to make of it. I want to get your take. When he asks if you have any reason to doubt the 2017 intelligence community's assessment that Russia meddled in the election and tried to do it in favor of Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, she says, I do not believe that I have seen that conclusion. I am not aware of that. Do you believe that she didn't read the assessment?
That seems highly unlikely. I mean, she's been asked about this before. This has been out there for a long time. It's part of her job to make sure that these infiltrations don't happen again. I just don't get it. I mean, it's been all over the place, and we know the Mueller team is looking at it, and I'm hoping personally for some indictments on this soon. So the fact that she wouldn't know about this seems unlikely to me.
Scott, from your perspective, do you think she didn't read the report, or do you think she doesn't believe it? I don't know.
Collusion between anybody involved with Donald Trump and the Russians.
But that wasn't the exact. That wasn't the question that Manu asked her. I mean, it was Manu Raju, our Manu Raju, that asked it, and he's a straight shooter. I mean, he asked her if she has any doubt about specifically the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that said it was Putin that tried to meddle in the election to help Donald Trump win. That's not CNN coming up with it. That's the intelligence community, Scott.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I've seen the reports about the assessment, and I also saw what the Senate Intelligence Committee said, and I believe the Russians were meddling in the election. I believe what the intelligence community said. I'm saying in a press conference like that, given the position that she has in this government, given her recent relationship with the president, I can see why she was choosing her words carefully. If we've read the reporting on her recently about some of the back and forth she's had with the president on immigration, she's obviously trying to be very, very careful in a public setting about what she says about a topic that obviously is on the president's mind every day.
It would be one thing if the question to her, Bill, had been, did you like it that Vladimir Putin was trying to help Donald Trump win? I mean, but when she's asked about a fact of what the intelligence community has drawn a conclusion on, where is their wiggle room?
Well, what's so deeply disturbing about this administration just generally is that they try to conflate information and confuse facts. And we end up arguing over whether or not there was an intent to lie behind misinformation that's delivered, or no intent to lie, just an intent to try to, smooth her relationship with the president. I mean, the meeting that happened yesterday at the White House between the president and the head of the FBI and the deputy attorney general would have been a scandal in any other administration. And that's a part of this effort to conflate facts and what's going on. There's an investigation going on that the president is trying to have an impact on, which in and of itself is an attempt to obfuscate from the things that we know. For example, that Vladimir Putin was actively engaged in the 2016 election, and it was to help President Donald Trump.
I hope the secretary has an opportunity to try to clarify her remarks one more time, because I'm straight up confused. When it's what the intel community has assessed, and she says she stands by it, why she can't actually say that she knows what they've actually said. Anyway, Jennifer, let's talk about the other big questions out there. This meeting to share classified information about the Russia probe with lawmakers that DOJ has agreed to. What do you think they could be handing over? The investigation is still underway.
Well, in a previous meeting, what they did is a verbal briefing. Instead of handing over documents, they just gave a sense verbally of where the investigation was. So, I hope that's it, because we know that the Hill leaks, so we know that if classified documents go over, their security is in question. So my hope is that they give a verbal briefing, just enough to satisfy the lawmakers, but not enough to jeopardize their investigation, because, of course, that's the big concern here, that this will undermine the efficacy of the investigation.
Bill, do you think the Justice Department, folded and gave in here?
Well, you can't really know the motivations of what's happening behind what Rod Rosenstein is thinking or what Christopher Wray is thinking, but you have to hope that as patriots, they're just trying to keep their jobs and keep the investigation going and not get fired and see the special counsel fired and this investigation stop. President Trump is so worried about leaks. One of the leaks that he doesn't seem to be talking about is the leak of this informant's name, by the way. And why don't we have an investigation into that? It seems like if that's classified information that's leaking out, that's an answer that we should be in search of. Who would leak that name?
Look, so you also then, Scott, have the justice officials handing over this question of, was there political motivation in using an FBI confidential source with information on the Trump campaign? Was there political motivation in that? That's now handed over to the Inspector General of the department. If the Inspector General says, no spy here, Scott, is Donald Trump going to accept it, do you think?
Well, I hope he does, because this is the way the government is supposed to work. The Inspector General can look into things, and the Congress can have oversight over agencies. Nobody in the government is beyond oversight. That's number one. Number two, I think this investigation of the investigators is appropriate, because we already know that politics was at least considered in some of the material we've seen, the text messages that have come out between a couple of agents.
But then it becomes this never-ending, and Scott, I hear you, but it becomes this never-ending kind of quest of who is there to trust. When Bob Mueller was brought on, everyone said, he's great, his reputation's amazing, he's without, he's without reproach, everyone loves him, he's a straight shooter. And now that is, depending on what side you're on, that's up for debate. But then who's going to be the unbiased arbiter of justice here?
If you want half the country that presently views this investigation with a jaundiced eye to accept the results of it, you have to close every possible door that is open to them right now that politics may be at play. So if you want to have this country accept, one way or the other, collusion, no collusion, whatever happens, if you want most Americans to accept it, you cannot leave on the table the possibility that political motivations were at play. Everybody ought to accept sunshine and transparency here, so that there's no question at the end of the day this was all done above board.
Except you have the FBI director, Chris Wray, who said to The Hill in a hearing, the moment we start outing human sources is the day that the American people are less safe. So there's this element of all of that as well. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much. Lots more questions than answers, as I said before. Coming up, we've got President Trump coming up soon. He will be welcoming the South Korean president to the White House, as U.S. officials are now worrying that North Korea could scrap the planned summit with the U.S. Can Moon Jae-in convince the president it's all going to be okay? President Trump sits down with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The questions lingering over the friendly chat are deadly serious. Can they bring peace to the Korean Peninsula? And most immediately, can they save the nuclear summit with North Korea? Just a few weeks ago, the outlook seemed pretty bright, but now the outlook is anything but. Why the change? Well, according to both North and South Korea now, it's John Bolton, the South Korean lawmaker, posting on Facebook this. Bolton's preposterous Libya solution is a red light in North Korea's summit talks with the U.S. and South Korea. As a reminder, here's what Bolton proposed.
We have very much in mind the Libya model from 2003, 2004. There are obviously differences. The Libyan program was much smaller, but that was basically the agreement that we made.
So that set off the North Koreans, who then cited the president's national security advisor as one of the reasons they are now threatening to pull out of the planned June 12th summit. And President Trump and the vice president have been trying to play cleanup ever since, it seems.
The Libyan model isn't a model that we have at all when we're thinking of North Korea. In Libya, we decimated that country. That country was decimated. There was no deal to keep Gaddafi. The Libyan model that was mentioned was a much different deal. This would be with Kim Jong-un, something where he'd be there, he'd be in his country, he'd be running his country. His country would be very rich.
As the president made clear, this will only end like the Libyan model ended if Kim Jong-un doesn't make a deal.
But does Mike Pence's cleanup sound much more like a threat? Joining me right now, former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama and now CNN Global Affairs Analyst Tony Blinken. Tony, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Kate.
What do you make of what Mike Pence said right there?
Look, I think you're exactly right. They are doing cleanup because when Kim Jong-un hears Libyan model, he hears regime change. And that's clearly not what he hopes to get out of the summit. But the bottom line is this. Kim Jong-un has maneuvered so well that he's getting into these negotiations, assuming they take place, from a position of strength. First, because now President Trump kind of needs this more than Kim Jong-un needs it. He's talked it up so much. The idea of this Nobel Prize is dancing out there in front of his eyes. And so he's in a position where he needs to have this happen, and he needs to make it a success. And that gives Kim a tremendous opportunity to go in from a position of strength and possibly get the contours of a deal that's much more beneficial to North Korea than it would be to us. That's what we have to be concerned about, that President Trump wants this so much that he'll take a bad deal.
Though he says he's okay to walk away. I mean, at this point, do you consider the summit on or off?
Look, I think it will be on. This is kind of classic North Korean negotiating tactics. Mm-hmm. They have long ago perfected the art of the steal. They will get into a negotiation. They'll string it out. They'll use the time to wring out concessions, economic concessions, and then at the end of the day, they'll walk away from some of the most significant commitments they claim to make in the agreement. And then pressure is exerted again, and you repeat. That's exactly the cycle that President Obama tried to break away from, and I think President Trump has to be very careful that he doesn't get caught in that again. But I think both sides actually do need to have this conversation. So if I had to bet, I think this is just maneuvering by Kim. He thinks that he has President Trump on the line. He's reeling him in by setting a very clear marker that he's not about to totally denuclearize. And setting that as the premise for the negotiation, I suspect they'll still go ahead and talk.
The role of President Moon here seems key. U.S. officials have told CNN that they believe that Moon oversold North Korea's willingness to negotiate away its nuclear program. If that's the case, what then?
Look, I think part of the reason that President Moon is bending over backwards to make this happen goes back to the fire and fury comments that President Trump made some months ago. That had probably more of an effect on South Korea than North Korea. The South Koreans were so concerned that we would engage in some kind of preventive military action that they've been bending over backwards to find a way to get into a negotiation, putting together a big economic package from North Korea. And by the way, if talks start, there's a real danger that the pressure that President Trump has effectively exerted against North Korea, building on what Obama did, that's been a good thing, that starts to fritter away pretty quickly because China and South Korea are looking for ways to re-engage economically with North Korea. So right now, the challenge is keeping South Korea and the United States in solidarity on the same line. That's why the conversation today between President Moon and President Trump is so important.
Tony, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Kate. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Coming up, fountains of molten lava, clouds of toxic gas. We're looking at live pictures from Hawaii here. Massive eruptions are now threatening a power plant in Hawaii. We're going to go live to the Big Island. over immigration. And this comes as moderates are inching closer to forcing a vote on a package of immigration bills using a procedural maneuver known as a discharge petition. By doing that, it would be a revolt against their leadership. Ryan has been telling members not to support it. Here's what he said just a short time ago.
I mean, obviously, we have members who are backers of the discharge petition who are really upset at the other members who brought down the farm bill over this issue. So we clearly have members at opposite ends of our spectrum who are frustrated with one another. That can happen in Congress. That can happen in a big majority party. It is our preference, obviously, to have a process where people get the kind of votes they're looking for, but that maximizes the opportunity and the chance of actually making law. I can guarantee you a discharge petition will not make law. So what's the point?
Well, let's get to the point. Republican Congressman Jeff Denham of California has been at the center of this effort, pushing this petition, pushing this move. He joins me right now live from Capitol Hill. So, Congressman, first off, what's the status of the push to force the vote on the DACA program?
We are at 201 signatures right now. We need 218. We've got Republicans and Democrats signing on this week. We feel very confident we have the votes we need to push this forward. But ultimately, we believe that this actually empowers the Speaker. To actually have a debate on all of these different bills is something that should not only empower the Speaker, but empower the American public to have a debate in full transparency.
The Speaker does not see it that way very clearly. As we just heard, he said, what's the point if it's not going to become law? I mean, he says that you all should you should all try to come together and work for a broader solution that could actually become law. Where is he wrong here, though, on the fact that even if you guys get the vote on the floor, that it's not going to become law?
First of all, I do agree that we should all be working together on one bill. Prior to this discharge petition, we only saw work being done on one bill that was not bipartisan, that was not going to make it through the Senate, that was basically just an extension of President Obama's executive order. We've got to have a permanent fix here. That means both parties coming together, working together. And in this discharge petition, the four bills, the Speaker has a bill of his own where he can put the four pillars, he can put the president's policy in there, he can put whatever policy he thinks will pass the House and get signed into law. But the bottom line is we are willing to work together to have one bill that can be supported not only by the majority of the House, but actually one that will pass the Senate. And this is not for political reasons. This is to create law and to create certainty for these dreamers. We want to make sure that we not only put something on the president's desk, but we want to put something on the president's desk that he will support and sign into law.
But do you acknowledge that with the way you're going about it, the Senate's not going to take it up? I mean, that seems to just be reality.
Oh, I don't think that's reality at all. I think that you put something in the Senate that has broad bipartisan support in the House. I think the Senate, the media, I'm sure, and the public across the country will pressure the Senate to bring something up that is very bipartisan. But it starts here in the House, and we're going to demand that debate.
If you're able to force this vote, it doesn't end up going anywhere. Who do you blame? Do you blame Paul Ryan? Do you blame Mitch McConnell? Do you blame Donald Trump?
Look, first of all, I think it's the job of the House. We not only need to make sure that we have a debate, but that we actually have a plan where Republicans and Democrats can work together on this. And so we have done this discharge petition in this way to not only empower the Speaker, but to actually have a bill that has Republicans and Democrats working together on right now. That's the only way it's going to make it through a 60-vote Senate, but certainly it's our best pathway to getting it out of the House as well.
How many more votes do you think you're going to be able to get from Republicans this week? How many more people do you think you can get to sign on?
I am extremely confident we have 218 today, but after last week's showdown on the Farm Bill, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have a lot more than 218.
Can I ask you real quick, because this just happened, top national security officials were briefing some members of the House on election security today. Coming out of it, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristen Nielsen, she was asked by Manu Raju she was asked about the intel assessment of 2017 that, of course, determined that Russia meddled in the election and tried to do so with a clear preference for Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton. When she was asked by Manu about that, she says, "I do not believe that I have seen that conclusion. I'm not aware of that." Do you believe that conclusion?
I don't, but I am looking to see all of the evidence pertaining to that. Look, we've known that China and Russia have meddled in elections across the globe, including in the U.S. and it's something we ought to continue to investigate. It was something we were investigating under the Obama administration as well.
You don't believe the 2017 assessment, though, of the intel community?
I'm looking at I want to look at the entire report first.
Okay. Congressman, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
The Santa Fe high school shooter is saying now about his son. And that father told the Wall Street Journal his son did it because he was bullied. Here's the quote. "I think that's what was behind the shooting." On Friday, the 17-year-old allegedly opened fire on his classmates, killing 10 people. As that community mourns and the nation asks why, a former Secretary of Education is pushing a radical idea. Keep kids out of school until lawmakers take action. Here's Arnie Duncan's tweet where he said this. "This is brilliant and tragically necessary. What if no children went to school until gun laws changed to keep them safe? My family is all in if we can do this at scale. Parents, will you join us?" Secretary Arnie Duncan is joining me right now. Secretary, thank you for coming in.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So the father, as I just read, the father of the Santa Fe high school shooter, he told the Wall Street Journal that he thinks his son was bullied and that's what motivated the shooting. Do you think that could be it?
Honestly, I have no idea. That is, sometimes the case, but I have no specific information on this particular tragedy.
And a lot of this gets to where the conversation has been in the last couple of days of what motivates shootings, right? The Texas lieutenant governor, he blames school shootings on what he calls the devaluing of life. He laid it out over the weekend saying that the loss of religion in school, violent video games, and even abortion is what's leading to all of this somehow. What do you say to that?
I just think all of that is very disingenuous. And the United States does not have a monopoly on bullying, although I absolutely abhor bullying. The United States doesn't have a monopoly on video games or single parents or Ritalin. What we have in tremendous abundance relative to other nations is the easy availability of guns. That is always, by definition, the common denominator here. Over the last 8 or 9 years, there have been 288 mass shootings in schools. Relative to other nations, most they had was 5, 6, 7, wildly disproportionate. We've just lacked the political will. We've lacked the courage to protect our children. Lawmakers are way behind where the young people are themselves, where we as parents need to be, and it's time to compel them to change and keep our children safe and allow them to grow up free of fear.
Let's get to what you're suggesting now. You're the former head of the Department of Education. You're the former head of Chicago Public Schools. Why would you ever suggest it's a good idea to keep kids out of the classroom?
It is absolutely a radical idea. It is provocative. I know it would be very difficult. It's counter to everything I've talked about all my life of trying to get kids to school and to stay in school. But I just think as a nation, we're at a breaking point, and we just cannot continue to allow our children and our adults to die due to senseless gun violence. It just simply doesn't happen in other countries. And what I'm talking about is an idea, for all the difficulty, for all the impracticality about it, I think would shock the nation, would create the kind of tension that we've lacked, and we need a creative tension to compel lawmakers to change. If we did something like this as we go back to school after Labor Day in the fall, early September, if lawmakers made some very significant changes, that'd be amazing. If they don't, we're walking right behind that into the elections in November, and we would have to hold them accountable in the voting booth for their lack of action.
Well, Secretary, I mean, from 2009 to 2011, of course, Democrats had control of all of Washington, right? House, the Senate, and the White House. During that time, by CNN's count, there were 5 school shootings. No real federal action on guns. Do you regret that?
I've said repeatedly that the biggest failure I felt in Washington was that we got nothing done after the Sandy Hook massacre. That was my worst day in Washington. President Obama, who dealt with the hardest issues on the planet, talked about that was his worst day in Washington. None of us ever imagined that 20 babies, 5 teachers, and an amazing principal would be slaughtered, and we got 0 done. So this is an issue that has plagued me all my life. During my time running the Chicago Public Schools, on average, every 2 weeks, one of my children was killed, not in schools, thankfully, but in the community, going to those funerals, going to classrooms where there was an empty desk, going to those children's homes. Nothing was ever easy about that. That was the hardest thing that I've ever done. And as a nation, it just doesn't have to happen. There's some common sense things that everyone agrees on, the vast majority of the American public, criminal background checks for everyone who wants to purchase a gun, banning weapons of war, assault weapons, making sure that we have research behind the impact of gun violence. We just have to get these things done, and it has to happen at the national level. This can't just be state by state.
Even if those things would not have protected against what we saw.
It can't protect against everything, but it would lead to an exponential reduction in violence. And the fact that we've refused to take these steps that every other nation, Canada, England, Japan, Australia, right down the list, every other nation has chosen to protect life and to save lives.
Secretary, do you really mean it? Do you really want to see students be kept out of school? Do you really mean it when you say you'll keep your kids out of school? Because it could be, if we know how long this debate's been going on and how entrenched people are, they would be out of school for a very long time.
Well, we wouldn't have to stay out forever. Again, what I said is if we looked at this early in September, did it for, again, lots of details to work out, and again, recognize it's hard, recognize it's difficult, recognize it's impractical. Did it for a couple of days, see whether lawmakers react or not, and either way, we go to the voting booth in November. But Kate, let me just push.
Yeah.
We can continue to do nothing. We continue to throw up our hands in the air and just watch children die. And the fact that just broke my heart beyond the obvious heartbreaking tragedies, the fact that the young girl who was interviewed there in Texas, the reporter asked, did you ever think this would happen? And she said, actually, I did. I thought it was just a matter of time. Think about the psychological toll of our children all over the nation every single day, just thinking it's a matter of time before they get shot. We have to do better for them. We have to protect our children. We as parents, putting myself, I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, we have failed to keep our children safe, and we have to do something different.
Yeah, that young girl's remarks, if it doesn't break your heart and doesn't shock you to your core,
and that's real, and that's true for millions of kids. That's what's hard. That's true for millions of kids, and we have allowed that to happen in the United States. That has to stop. That is untenable.
Thanks for coming in. Let's see.